Welcome to the Media Roundtable, where we explore the business of trust in the new media economy. I'm your host, Dan Granger. I'm the CEO of Oxford Road. This is our biggest presentation of the year that we're about to play for you. Once a year, we do our CAO Summit. This year, like always, now we've been doing it from the event's home in Palos Verdes at Terranea. We did our fourth annual CAO Summit, and the summit has a few different parts, and some of it's really based on bringing together creators and brands and breakout sessions and letting advertisers talk to each other. But one thing I have the privilege of doing at the beginning of the event, when we do the conference on our second day, is we open up with a keynote that I've been giving for the last now 4 years, talking about the state of the industry. And the way we've defined the industry has shifted. And so much of what's been going on this year has been about identity. And so whereas we used to use the A in CAO to be a catch-all of audio for the industry, this time we're really focused on the state of podcasting. So that was the focus of my keynote. And I don't want to give it all away about what we're going to talk about, but there's some data about just what's been going on in the last 12 months we're going to give you. And some of that is going to be very podcast specific, but then overlapping with that is the creator economy and the audio economy. We're going to talk about how all three of those kind of slices of the media ecosystem have been evolving. And we're going to talk about where they come together. The biggest thing is that we track with the evolution of what's been going on in the podcasting industry, where it's kind of been orphaned between audio and video. And it's trying to assert its own identity. And we really use this moment as a chance for our industry to come together in one room and talk about finally establishing itself and asserting itself as its own medium and not just a subset of another. The way that impacts you as a brand or you as a buyer or seller of media is really, really important, because to say that podcasting is its own medium means that it has its own standards. Right now, it does not. And so we talk a lot about things like the challenges in trust when you're equating things like downloads and views and trying to run an economy around it when the pipes and the tubes don't really connect. And how that relates to the essence of the channel, which is about content predicated on the trust that a host or a creator has spent oftentimes years building with their audience, that a brand really gets to borrow from them. How does it work when you're kind of invading the relationship between a creator and a brand, and you're using metrics so they can talk to each other that aren't yet standardized? That's a lot of what we get into, because it's been so important is you understand what's been happening in our industry over the last 12 months. At the end of the day, a big part of this is that because we don't have standards, there is a tax we impose on ourselves. It is what is affectionately known as an idiot tax, because it isn't necessary, but it's something we impose on ourselves. And we used this moment of the keynote to kind of frame the issue, draw out the experience that advertisers are having and that sellers of advertising are having to make this industry continue to grow and scale, and proposing a way that we can all row in the same direction. We also get into a lot of other types of data. In 2026, for example, podcast as an industry is up 16%. Channels like radio sit flat. Streaming audio sits flat from a revenue standpoint. And so we get into that. We get into the truth about video, the state of YouTube, what YouTube is bringing to the party that is helpful, and what is less valuable than what video might get credit for. These are the kinds of things that we're going to unpack here today. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're presenting a new way that the industry can keep score for itself that you can actually use on Monday. So this isn't really just a lecture on standards. But what we really tried to do in this year's keynote is not only tell you about what's going on in the marketplace, but actually put you at the center of it and have you join an initiative to really align as an industry around a shared set of standards that can help us not just watch the industry evolve, but force it to evolve in a way that helps us all and creates a scenario where all boats can rise. So this is, if we've ever done anything that mattered for the industry more than just sharing information that you can use tactically as a brand, this is one where we're trying to do something bigger, and it goes from a typical state of the union, so to speak, and really goes more into not just what can you do as an active participant in the industry, but what can we all do together collectively to help each other. That's what this is about, and we hope you learn a lot, and we hope that you are so compelled by what you're about to hear here today that you're ready to take action. So thanks for giving it a listen, and here is this year's keynote from the CAO Summit. We're trying to, really convene the whole industry here. We're going to take an industry, we're going to move it like 90 degrees and point it in another direction. So buckle up. It's going to be busy, but I just can't wait for our farewell event tonight where we're standing out there and just recapping what this has been like for you. Last night was about the trust between creators and audiences. And I guess to Shira's point, you can take your first shot. This morning is about what happens when trust has to travel across platforms, onto a media plan, into a CFO conversation, and ultimately into revenue. Podcasting now sits where audio and creator media collide. Two industries, both kind of claiming ownership, and podcasts is very much each and very much neither. So it creates enormous opportunity, and we're going to unpack that. But it also creates, candidly, an infrastructure problem that is unacceptable at this stage of the industry. Let's start with something in your pocket that only works if you trust it. Anywhere in the country, this is worth $1. You don't inspect it. You don't open 6 tabs and ask 3 vendors to estimate what it might be worth. You just trust it. The paper is not valuable because it's paper. It's valuable because we all agree on what it means. That agreement is infrastructure, and good infrastructure should be invisible to the user. It wasn't always this simple. For most of the 1800s, every bank printed its own money. That means there were thousands of banks with thousands of notes and no shared value. $1 note from Ohio could be worth 70 cents across town, or it could be worth nothing one state over. Merchants kept banknote reporters on the counter just to look up whether the money was real and what it was worth. Sound familiar? Today, we have platforms that each print their own currency. We have downloads, plays, views, streams, video views. Each number may be perfectly valid inside of one individual system that created it, but the problem appears when a brand tries to compare them to each other. That's when we become the old merchant with the book on the counter, except that our book is 6 dashboards, 3 APIs, a spreadsheet, and someone on the team saying, I think these are directionally aligned. The old money was not discounted because people didn't want it. It was discounted because nobody could agree on what it was worth. That's where creator media stands today. The trust is absolutely unprecedented. I think we all know that. That's a big part of why we're here. The audience is growing. The business impact is profound, and most of you have experienced that firsthand. But every time that value crosses a platform boundary, somebody has to translate it. And every translation increases friction. It increases assumptions. It increases doubt. And that value gets diminished with every translation. So the dollar didn't get fixed with a better note. It got fixed when people agreed on a standard. And that is the story this morning. Where trust went, why money can't follow cleanly, and what it looks like when an industry decides to start cooperating with itself. Let's talk about where the trust went. Trust didn't disappear. Institutional trust, at least, didn't fully disappear. It relocated. So I don't want to belabor this because I think you all know by now. You've seen the Edelman Trust Barometer. You've seen what's happening in the world. Confidence in institutions has plummeted, and the need for trust has shifted to individuals. The host that you choose, the creator who shows up every week, the voice with enough time to reveal how it thinks, that's where the trust lives today. Confidence in mass media has dropped down to 28%. Okay, so there was a period of time, if you ever look at the charts on this, trust in institutions has been on a pretty steady decline for about 50 years, a little bit more. After Watergate, and actually when they released All the President's Men in 1976, that was like the peak high water mark in America for trust in news media. Ever since then, you can look at it, it just goes down and down and down and down. So today, we went from that time, it was north of 70%. Today, we're at about 28%. Among influencers, podcasters stand out. If you ask podcast listeners, 52% find podcast hosts more personally influential than social media influencers and celebrities. Social media influencers come in second place with that, with 24% relative to the 52%. 2 in 3 say the host read feels authentic and prompts action. I would submit that the third that don't say that are because that's when the host is just phoning it in and reads the whole ad like a disclaimer. You've probably heard that before. Our media team is not very excited when that happens. But when the host cares and when you can feel that it's authentic, they mean what they're saying, you believe that they believe in the product or the service that they're endorsing, that means something. And so people who choose podcasts assign extraordinary trust to the host. A host read feels different because it is different. It's not a celebrity standing next to a logo. It's a person risking a relationship that they have spent years cultivating. When a brand buys this medium, it's not just buying a slot, it's borrowing on that trust that's been cultivated. And that is the asset. It is not audio, it is not video, and it is not RSS feed that is the actual asset in this channel. The asset is a trusted relationship with a person carried through a show. So audio and video are the destinations, but the relationship, that is the medium that we're talking about. Podcasting began being kind of classified in the media taxonomy as an audio medium, hence CAO, why I'm like totally neurotic about what we call this thing, and I'm very open to suggestions for what we do with that A as we move forward. I don't want to rebrand. We have too many acronyms. But it now extends across video, social, events, beyond. You watched a podcast get recorded last night. It takes a lot of different forms. So it's no longer just a subset of audio. That's too limiting. And it's not just a subset of video, because sometimes it's just audio. But podcasting has actually reached a critical mass and has become its own distinct channel. It now has the intimacy of audio combined with video's scale and community, which has made podcasting stronger, clearer, and more powerful than ever. You already know I'm biased, but podcasting really is special, and I think I'm not alone in feeling that way. It is one of the few places left where a brand, so if you only look at it from an advertising perspective, it is like maybe one of the only areas where there is a turf war and an opportunity for brands to claim territory, to stake it out and to hold it, and really create a moat around their business. It's an annuity and it's a moat, because if you do it properly and you claim your position on a show, your competitors can't go there, okay? You can't really do that with most media. You all know about the successes of companies like Squarespace, ZipRecruiter, Shopify, BetterHelp. These weren't just campaigns, they actually became part of the medium, and they actually bent an industry. In many cases, like I think BetterHelp's a great anecdote, because they didn't just spend a lot of money on podcasts, they actually retrained people's brains to destigmatize therapy. That was a major cultural shift, and I think BetterHelp and podcasting were a huge part of that. You could probably make the same argument about psychedelics, but this is a medium that truly changes people's brains. That's the kind of ownership and dominance that's really rare in media. So there's no 15-second limit. There's no character count. There's no algorithm today or historically that dictates what the content has to be or fit into. A host delivers it in their own voice inside of a conversation that the audience chose to be a part of. So you can go long, specific, and personal, and people stay with you because they trust the person that's speaking. If you stay long enough, a campaign can become territory that the brand owns. So there's three tensions going on right now in media that all kind of collide in podcasting. So I think I know everything's podcast, but I actually think some of what's happening in podcasting can be really instructive as we try to understand just what's happening in media broadly right now. So in podcasting, it's really interesting. We want to be so binary with everything. Is it audio? Is it video? Is it creator? Well, the consumer now gets to have it how they want it. They can wake up and they can start listening to a show. Then they can toggle and see it on a video when they're stationary. And then they can take it on the road and they can have it through audio again. They want it both ways and they get to have it how they want it. That's just the way things are going. So that's one of the tensions, is between audio and video. The other tension, the second one I'll talk about, is just this tension between closed systems and open systems. You know, podcasting for so many years really was very tightly associated with the RSS feed, that it could be distributed anywhere, consumed on demand, no gatekeepers, no algorithms. It could just get picked up, and there is absolutely nothing impacting what's happening between the consumption and what is shared. Today, it's a both and. You cannot limit podcasting to just the RSS feed because it's now behind walled gardens, and it's in things that are actually affected by algorithms too. So things are getting a little more diversified and a little more complicated. The third thing that is happening in podcasting that I think is, indicative of media everywhere is the tension between control going to humans and control going to machines. Okay, so if some of you were at Cannes, there were really two discussions happening along the beach, and one of them was about AI. What is it doing? What is the future of agentic? And what's going to happen? Like, how soon do we get to the point that it just kind of figures out what to say and where to say it, and we plug the money into the machine, and just like Meta is today, it's really smart and it figures out how to vacuum out as much money as possible and give you what you need for that money, but not a lot of agency from the human. We're turning the agency over to the machines. That's one theme that's happening. The other theme is creator media. Creator media is so radically different that we talk about, there's a brand here today who did a whole campaign with a one-sentence brief to the creator. So it's about freedom. It's about actually allowing a creator to do whatever they think is best. And I think everybody's somewhere on that spectrum. Some of you are in really highly regulated industries. You don't have the luxury. Some of you just have a really controlling executive team that thinks that you need to tell a creator every single word that they need to use. But everybody's somewhere on the spectrum, right? And I think the market is really pulling us towards saying, let's break away from having everything be so manufactured and synthesized. Let's actually let things breathe. Let's have partnerships and co-create. That's a lot of what we were trying to do yesterday. We're going to get into a lot of that later today. How do you actually work out something so we're not just shoehorning mandated copy points onto talent and seeing what they do with it, but we actually let them think and create and extend a message to their audience in a way that we'll never be able to figure out. And that's the tension that's going on. And I think the whole media landscape is really kind of struggling through this right now. And podcasting is very much struggling with this too, because we want to automate. We want to find platforms that scale. We want to give it to the algorithms in a way, but what do we lose when we do that? And what are we choking out that may actually be the golden goose that brought us here to begin with? Reading the landscape, let's get into the fun part. I'm going to take you through some of the headlines that shaped the last 12 months in the channels that we're talking about: creator, audio, podcasting. So let's go through some numbers. Podcasting and creator media both moved up, and whether you count podcasts as part of that or not, they both moved up about 16 to 17% in the last year. Podcasting, you can see 3.4 billion in the US projected, although, like, not to derail too much, but how do you know what you're counting when you do 3.4 billion? Because there's no definition of a podcast. So I'm not really sure that we can have total confidence in what we're measuring, because nobody can agree on what we're actually measuring. But if you could, and you could make some assumptions, we're at about 3.4 billion. Creators are at about 12.4 billion. And about half of that creator money flows to micro and nano influencers, which I actually had to Google this morning to get clear. But the micro is defined as 10 to 100,000 followers, and the nano is like sub 10,000, so or 1,000 to 10,000. We got a lot of nano influencers in the room, so congratulations, everybody. Okay, the long tail is a really important point, and I hope that doesn't get lost here. Radio and streaming, kind of a complicated topic, but $4.9 billion when you add them together. By the way, we like radio. We actually saw, if you can believe it, I mean, like, we try not to make jokes. I came from radio. I worked in radio for 10 years. A lot of us did. But it's, it's easy to just write it off and say, radio's dying, radio's old news, like, let's like help it transition peacefully. But the truth is, this thing is still real. And we actually saw material growth last year. We're actually getting a lot of interest, and it's outgrowing a lot of channels that you would think are, more digital. There's still real opportunity there. You just have to kind of get in the pocket and understand it. And I know we're going to do some work on that later. For the people it makes sense for. It doesn't make sense for everybody. There's a lot of measurement stuff that you got to work through. But it's interesting because it's kind of flat right now. What's also interesting is that streaming audio is also flat. Now, why would digital audio be flat? From what we can discern, and sometimes you got to break up these numbers in the way that they're reported, but what it appears to us is that it's not an audience growth problem, but a lot of the growth in consumption is happening through subscription-based places, Spotify, other places that people are paying not to hear ads. So even though the consumption might be growing, the advertising opportunity is not growing as much. Let's see. So it's not a surprise that creators have become so important. 48% of marketers now call creators a must-buy. We are well past the experimental phase. We're talking about half of marketers not just saying, like, I'm interested, I'm dabbling. It's like, no. This is a mandate. And I don't know if this is to be trusted, but I will tell you, like, party at a mansion in Cannes at night, people talking, there is a not insubstantial chance that in the next 30 days you hear an announcement that one of the largest advertisers on the planet starts mandating 60% plus of their media to be allocated toward creators. I don't know, but we know the direction. This is what's happening. Okay, so we need to plan accordingly. And the reality is there isn't enough infrastructure to do this in an organized way. It's going to be a mess, but that's where it's headed. So let's see. Allocation. Where's the most durable value in all of this? Podcasting is the long-form, high-trust end of the spectrum. YouTube, which we're going to talk a lot about today, is a key destination. So let's take a minute and think about our friends at YouTube. The creator spend is nearly the size of podcasts, in that there's about 3.7 billion that's actually being spent like in the host-read kind of way on YouTube as far as they're able to calculate. I'm not super confident that anybody really knows because it's kind of off the grid. Right now, it's not really run through YouTube, so we have to triangulate a lot to even say something like that. But YouTube has a $50 billion ad business. Steve is here. He can correct me if I'm screwing up any of these numbers, but that's what it looks like. And YouTube's value is not being built because of studio programming so much as it's being built by independent creators, the type of people that do podcasts. There is something happening called DIBS. If you haven't heard about it, that's dynamic brand segments. The big shift that's happening is that YouTube is moving toward a solution that's going to be like DAI for YouTube ads within podcasts. So I think some of the good news, and this is a little bit speculative because it's so early, but it may allow for measurement on YouTube through Google's infrastructure, which might make it potentially easier in some cases to access video podcast inventory. The potential risk here is that if you go too far down that route, it just deepens the divide between podcasts where one show has to have a set of metrics over here and somebody sponsoring the same episode has to have a different set of metrics over here because of where it was distributed. It's a big part of the friction that we're dealing with here. So attribution and reporting standards may not match everywhere else. Let's keep moving. When we think YouTube, we might be thinking video dominates podcasting. And I think there can be oftentimes a false assumption, and I think when you're evaluating CPMs in media, it's really important to understand how people are actually working with the content. How are they consuming it? And video podcasts, in our view, are not replacing audio. In fact, 21% of video use is actually replacing audio podcast consumption. The other nearly 80% is totally additive. So 44% of the time with YouTube podcasts are actually not people watching a screen. People are still using it very much for audio as a distribution platform. Another thing is that 58% of YouTube users listen to their shows on other platforms as well. So I would say that it's not that video is replacing audio. Video and audio are inextricably linked, and like we talked about earlier, the consumers are going to get it the way that they want it, and the consumers are going to be having the same consumption experience, but they're going to switch back and forth between audio only and audio with video. That's where the puck is moving. Okay, let's look at some different roles that audio and video play. So this is what's really, really important. The reason so much of this is happening and that we're having all this conversation is because of the way that, frankly, YouTube and video have started to reshape the podcast marketplace. And YouTube is unmatched for discovery. Video audiences, Nielsen put this out this month, skews towards students with flexible schedules and dedicated time to sit and watch or share on social. Now, an audio consumer is typically a little more affluent and professionally established. They've got busy routines. They're traveling throughout the whole day, and they have deeper, more intentional consumption. So the way we think about it is that YouTube is expanding the pie in a very important way in podcasting. We have had a promotion problem in this industry for a long time, in that you're just kind of waiting for like the good word about a show to spread. You're doing feed swaps, but it's really hard to sample, it's hard to promote, it's hard to engage different audiences. And so YouTube is like, for me, I don't think the video piece is nearly as important as what YouTube has done for discovery and podcasting. So it's the recruiter. It's pulling people into the tent, and it's making our pool bigger. And that's really important. But when you're in the recruiting part, you're going to be bringing in a lot of people. So it doesn't have the same depth as the people that are there for the audio version. They're a little bit more invested. So this is not to say like one version is good and one is bad. It is not that at all. These two forces are working together. They behave differently, and they're helping evolve what we understand to be a podcast as this medium keeps getting bigger and bigger. Okay. So I'm just going to talk about Orbit for a minute. Some of you may be familiar with this. Orbit stands for the Oxford Road Benchmark Intelligence Tool. So what we did was, after we put Oxford Road and Veritone 1 together, we ended up with this enormous data set. And our data set just crossed over the $2 billion threshold. So what we were able to do is take a bunch of attributed performance data across hundreds of brands' campaigns, and we're able to normalize and actually create a performance score for like every individual asset based on its historical performance against a client's goal. And that allows us, obviously, to de-risk a lot of plans, because past performance is a really good indicator if you're reaching the same type of customer when you're planning for the future, whether you're a performance marketer or not. So what we started doing, just to kind of, as a little bit of a tease to the market, we started putting out top 15 lists, generally genre-focused, looking at things like, how did the old school podcasts perform against newer stuff? What are the top 15 comedy podcasts, things like that. Here's so we put out about 9 of these. We try to do one a month. But I think one of the things we've learned in the past 12 months about performance in this channel is that passion beats popularity pound for pound, almost without exception. So newer voices can outperform some of the biggest names. Subgenres like mental health can outperform a broader bucket like self-improvement. And so, what that basically means is, like, if we were to ask everybody here, write down your favorite podcast, and it's like, oh, Smartless, New Heights, the usual suspects, right? Like, those typically, they're going to give you reach, they're great, they're important, we love them. If you're looking for performance, you want to go deeper, because the deeper you go, the better the return. And both of these things play an important role. We're not here to say one's good and one's bad. They just have different functions. So, the best thing that you can do to build on this and learn from performance is to really commit to what you're buying, understand the community, and get in the corners as best as you can if you're somebody that's accountable for the outcomes from your campaign. Better to go deep. Okay, another thing, Mark Ritson, smart marketer. Everybody that knows Mark Ritson loves Mark Ritson and says he's a genius. And what he just put out was some research at just a couple months ago saying that campaigns using audio are 32% more effective than ones that don't. And there's a but. If audio investment doesn't last a year, you don't get the same result. So again, here we are talking about going deep rather than, just putting a toe in the water. I mean, honestly, this isn't revelatory. 1998, there's a book called The Wizard of Ads by a guy named Roy H. Williams, and those of us with a radio background remember this. But he said, like, decades ago that if you actually want a radio campaign to work, and you're not just doing like the heroin hit of like, we're going out of business, so buy right now or else you're going to lose the deal forever. Like, if you're actually buying the medium of radio, you have to do it 90 days just to establish a baseline. You're going to lose money in the first 90 days, but the second 90 days, you're going to start making money, and you're going to recoup by the end of the first 6 months, which you lost in the first quarter. You'll make money the second half of your first year in radio, and your second year you will double that amount, and your third year you will triple that amount from year one. These are things that have been published forever, but there's new data coming out even today that says like some of these models actually still hold. So if you got radio on the brain, try to play the long game. It's not for everybody. And in fact, the guy that I'm talking about, he has an agency in Texas. You can call him. He won't talk to you if you won't buy 52-week schedules. Like, he doesn't do short-term tests. You guys love that. I know the brands in this room love to do multi-year things the first time they're trying them, right? But, like, that's actually what works. Very counterintuitive. Okay, we're going to keep cruising. There's a lot of risks to the depth and trust. One of them is clutter. So 2 years ago, so this is our third year that we're looking at, we call it pod load. We put out our first pod load report And 2 years ago, we released something we called the Oxford Clock, which basically was us saying, what's the impact on an advertiser and the results that they're going to get based on how many ads are in a show, how many commercial minutes per hour are in a show. And what we saw was there are dips, there's like cliffs, and we found that the sweet spot is if you can do like 8 minutes of ads per hour, that's like almost perfectly optimal. You can do basically 4 breaks on the clock. You can always keep the consumer 60 seconds from the voice of the host, 2-minute ad breaks, and it should be a good balance of what the consumer will allow and tolerate and what will still allow sellers to maximize their yield. So anyway, we've been watching this. We've been watching the commercial load. We have gone in the last 12 months from 9.5% of an average podcast ad load, where 9.5% of the time is running ads. It's gone to 10.9% in a year, 9.5 to 10.9%. Over the last 5 years in podcasting, it has increased 36%. Now, we're still way better than radio. If we're close to 11%, radio's like 25%. But why are we even getting that close? Okay, so if you see something, say something. We need to keep ad loads low. It's better for everybody. It's not as exciting for sellers that are trying to figure out how to jam in more ads and lower CPMs so you'll buy them. But please don't look at this as a CPM-driven opportunity, because you will waste all your money. This is something where factors like ad load really matter, and we want the market to be more aware of the different levels, because we know some publishers that have 6 minutes of ads an hour and others that are actually reaching 20. So pay attention to this and keep watching this space. That's it for the numbers. Let's talk about some of the infrastructure developments. I'm going to try to move quickly. The plumbing has changed in 3 different places. One, it has changed in publishing. There are more ways to carry the same show. So Apple implemented HLS. And by the way, Jake Shapiro with Apple is here. He can talk to you about this more. But basically, it allows for more smooth video streaming. It shows that they're re-engaged or deeply engaged in the podcast space, and they're taking video's role very seriously. Spotify has also gotten in line with HLS and completed their megaphone migration. YouTube has announced dynamic brand segments that we talked about earlier. More inventory sources is the second infrastructure change. So YouTube audio is now accessible to be sold through SiriusXM and Pandora through a partnership, which is great because you're used to getting that type of inventory from that supplier. Google's a very big, busy company. And I think that for those of us that are in this space, it's going to remove some of the friction in the buying experience. Also, international markets are opening up more supply. And just to give you a sense of scale, the international opportunity is collectively about equal to what's the opportunity in the United States. Okay, measurement evolution. Magellan AI, who is here, has started integrating Nielsen DMA data. They have partnered with Signal Hill for brand lift studies, and they have an expansion of capabilities in radio tracking and international expansion. Claritas now is offering a broadcast measurement solution, and they have a partnership with Amazon and are moving into creative optimization, which, by the way, is the type of thing that we should be spending a lot more time talking about than we do. But we can't get off the attribution conversation, so we really don't get to talk that much about creative, let's be honest. Podscribe, who's also here, has been developing opportunities for A/B testing, ad serving capabilities, and has an evolving, pretty sophisticated YouTube modeling solution. So there's a lot of progress happening. But we haven't really gone deep into AI. We're not going to go deep into AI, but let me touch it really quick. So AI can optimize the system, but it cannot manufacture the relationship. No state of media talk, they'll take away my license if I don't say the word agentic again. So Here's what we know. AI is changing search because people aren't getting links as much as they're just getting answers. And that's starting to change a lot of the dynamics. Now, my view, I think a lot of people's view, is it's a temporary phenomenon. Right now, upper funnel advertising is increasingly important because you don't have search to capture in the way that you did. But we know that that's migrating to the AI tools or the chat bots. And so it's migrating, but we're in the middle of that migration right now. AI can help allocate placements and advise on tactical allocations. There is a lot of value, but right now, at least in this space, it's probably more valuable just for like back office. People have been dabbling with synthetic content. If you don't follow this industry very closely, like there's a company that came out and started flooding the zone with a ton of AI created content. People got pissed. They started doxing the CEO. It's really sad. But like people are trying to drive that forward. It's not taking. Nobody's really responding to it. And I don't think there's a there right now. Maybe there will be later. But right now it's about people. The authenticity thing is working. The whole AI slop filling the libraries isn't really valuable for a brand. So AI cannot manufacture the core value of podcasting. The other thing is like getting early results from you guys on this year's What Brands Want survey. 2 out of 10 of you said that you would be okay with fake clone host endorsements. I don't even know why we asked that question. We're never going to do that. And we're not going to judge the two people, but come on. All right, so use AI to scale where you can, but don't use it to counterfeit the reason that people came. Let's keep moving. What do we got? Oh, look at all this. Okay. We got some ambassadors for the Murdoch family in the room. 2 different sides of it. This week in succession, we have, let's see, Vox has been purchased by James Murdoch, who's kind of out of the Fox umbrella. We have our friends at Red Seat Ventures. They have been on a tear. Tony Hinchcliffe, Ashley Flowers, now part of Red Seat Ventures. Congratulations to our partners there. They just picked up, they've had Tubi, they just picked up Roku. You've got Netflix acquiring, with Spotify acquiring the rights to Jay Shetty. You know, we're still talking about $100 billion deals, so congratulations to all of them. You saw this crazy, I forgot what the number is, but OpenAI buys a tech podcast, which like, I have a podcast. It's like the audience is probably very similar to this room in size, which is great. It's great. But like if somebody wants to give me $20 million for that, that'd be awesome. And that's kind of what happened because they were actually just trying to reach a very influential constituency. Why would they buy a podcast network? Because they need the influence. And it's not that easy to find. There's a lot of money moving around, and that's some of the stuff that's been happening with the capital. Podcasting is the medium. Trust and relationship are really the asset. Audio and video are how they travel. This is where I just want to talk about, some of the passion and some of the reasons that I think podcast is really interesting. Like if you think about it as a consumer, we talked about how there's no clocks and there's no character counts and all that. And, I think the stuff that we are now learning is killing us as a society. All of the scrolling, all of the like adrenaline hits and the clips and the shorts and the reels and the short bits of information that make us feel things and get crazy and hate each other. Like podcasting, when done well, is the antidote. I'm not saying it can't be exploited. I'm not saying there aren't people using it to divide us and to do evil things. But I will say it's a lot easier to have a conversation and build a relationship, solve a problem, unpack a thought when you're not limited on your character count or how many seconds you get to explain something. You can actually do nuance in this channel, which is virtually dead. So it's actually really important, and it taps into people in a different way than other types of media. And the impact of that downstream means it's very commercially powerful. You can make a lot of money with this stuff, hence the OpenAI acquisition. So that's one of the things that's great about it. And as a byproduct of that, people are like, you'll meet people that are really excited about podcast as a medium. And I was just talking to somebody this morning. I'm like, can you think of any other media where people are just excited about like the channel? Like who's like, I love CTV. Like, and And the only idea I've heard thrown out there is like, well, maybe like ham radio. There's like communities around that. But like you can't distribute commercials to them. We probably should try to figure that out. But it's its own thing, and people are actually passionate not just about the show, but about the medium itself. It means something to people. And so the industry needs to start recognizing it commercially as a medium. Podcasting occupies some interesting cultural positioning. It is part journalism, part entertainment, part education, part personal diary. It's not interchangeable with radio and YouTube videos. If podcasts were only audio, as some people would suggest, then video podcasts wouldn't feel like podcasts. They'd be videos. But they do feel like podcasts because the medium is defined by the podcast logic, not the presence or absence of visuals. We don't have commercial consistency in place for podcasting, as we've been talking about, far from it. Look at what tracking one line item can require. You've got data reconciliation, APIs, dashboard spreadsheets, pixels, surveys, promo codes, all the things, and you are bending over backwards as a marketer to try to post-rationalize 8 different types of numbers. And it's just, we could be using our time for so much better things. Like I talked about creative, deeper integration, smarter partnerships with media. Like there are additive things that would truly be transformative for your business if only we didn't have this tax that we pay to try to make all the wires connect. This is an idiot tax, which means it's self-imposed. I'm not saying anybody's an idiot here. You're all very smart people. You're also very handsome, and I love you. But why do we do this to ourselves, all of us? Why do we allow ourselves to spend all of our time talking about attribution? I've never had a topic take as much of my time talking to brands as attribution, and it is reductive. It does nothing to move the business forward. All we are doing is justifying our existence. We can do better. So this tax that we impose on ourselves, it only goes away through one thing, and that is standards. That is agreement. That is us coming together as an industry. Thinking about that $1 bill. The banks didn't merge, okay? They didn't stop competing. They agreed on the meaning of a unit so that value could move between them. A shared currency does not end competition. It makes trade faster. It makes it easier. And we do not need every platform to abandon what it built. We're not saying that like Apple has to stop talking about downloads or making that available. Keep it. It's fine. YouTube can have views. It's fine. But what we need is one shared reference that sits alongside the other metrics so that a buyer and seller can know if they're talking about the same thing. So what we're really saying here is that what podcast needs is recognition as a standalone medium. It needs to be treated not as a second-class citizen or a subset of something else. It is its own thing. And what it's going to take to actually do that without asking any platform to give up what makes it distinct is really important. So let's get into that. A year ago, most of the people that were here took the time to fill out that survey we keep pushing. And like we talked about, we do that not just because it's cool and fun, but that's like our playbook for what we're going to work on. I think like we are the world's largest buyer of podcast advertising. And I think that gives, at Oxford Road, us a little bit of a responsibility to try to make sure that we're advocating for brands, not just on an individual basis, but on an industry-wide basis. And what you told us last year is that podcasts would benefit from having a clear definition. Most people believe that because there's so much confusion about like whose budget is this coming out of and who's supposed to deal with this. Is this my audio team or my social team or my creator team or my radio team? Like, I looked at all your job titles. They're everywhere. There is no consistency. And I'm not saying you all need to be podcast specialists, okay? But it would be nice. It would just be nice if we knew what that was. So definition is one thing. We talked about impressions and the fact that there is no standard version of an impression between platforms. What does that mean? That means that your CPMs that you're making decisions on, or your team is, or your agency is actually arbitrary. It's not real, because somebody is telling you that you're paying a $13 or a $20 CPM that is comprised of downloads and views and plays, and they're all different, and none of it actually reliably correlates to how many people saw or heard your ad. So that's stupid, and you guys know that, and that is why we've been working really hard to try to figure out how do we fix some of this stuff so you can have more confidence in what you're buying and have more confidence in what you're selling. I don't even think we need to talk about attribution. You know how terrible it is. But that is probably your biggest pain point from what you've told us. The IAB just released a report on creator marketing and said the exact same thing. The two biggest improvements that were needed: advanced attribution and consistent reporting. So here's what we did. We took your feedback and we convened a task force. And many of the members of the task force were able to go on record and let us put their companies that they're part of up on the screen. We called it the Alliance for Measurement in Podcasting. And this is what we've been doing as a consequence of your feedback over the last 12 months. We brought together people from different parts of the market that represent different responsibilities. We didn't want it to be, just because we're ad buyers, doesn't mean that we want a whole industry to only accommodate one stakeholder group. We needed diversification. And what we did is we discussed these three things. Our members brought forth proposals. We had a charter. We voted on things. And what we ended up passing is what we're releasing today. And I'll tell you, nobody got everything that they wanted. And I think that's actually a very good thing. That's why it has value. But what we proved is that people, whether you're on the sell side, buy side, platform side, creator side, measurement side, talent agency side, ad agency side, all of these constituencies represented, we got everybody to move in the same direction. And I think that's kind of a rare thing. I think it's very exciting that we prove that people with competing interests can still cooperate without pretending that their divergent interests disappeared. So right now I'm going to bring up somebody that was truly a partner, and there were a few folks that this absolutely couldn't have. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, but one person in particular was really my partner in doing this and sat over everything technical that we did, because I'm not technical, by trade. That's not my core competency, but we needed to make sure that this thing was legit. So I want to introduce Giles Martin and ask him to come up to the stage. Come on up, Giles. They're ready for you. And Giles what have we been together, like 8 years, something like that. And Giles is a friend. It's good to see you. Okay, so Giles, we're going to start unpacking this together, and we're going to bring up a few friends, and we're going to round out this topic. But first, I just wanted Giles to help kind of unpack some of what we did. So Giles, going through this whole thing for the last 12 months, what do you think are the most consequential parts of it for brands?
I think they're all important, but I think it's hard to get away from attribution as being the key piece. As you say, we keep having conversations about it with clients who lack confidence in the results that they're seeing, or they have partial confidence. There's frequent concern about over-attribution. What we're going to recommend to the market today is a much more sophisticated approach to attribution that's more on par with the types of tools advertisers can get in platforms like Meta, platforms like Amazon, platforms like Google. So that, I think, is going to really move the needle.
Okay. So we're going to try not to get too boring and technical with this, but we do want you to understand what we were able to come up with as a task force. So we're going to go through the three conclusions one at a time and present that to you. Okay, first up, the AMP Accords is what we called it. So AMP, Alliance for Measurement in Podcasting, another acronym for you. You're welcome. So these were the three things that we did. And we are actually publishing today a document. You're going to get first dibs on it, but hopefully you actually don't read it while you're sitting here, because it's 48 pages long. We also have an explainer video that gives you most of it in 2 minutes. So we defined the medium of podcasting as a group. We found a consistent view of exposure and a credible path to better attribution. And these are issues that have, been going on way too long. So let's get into the first one, which is definition, right? So we have a shorthand up here, but that's not the technical definition. We actually agreed that this is a shorthand because you might remember this one. I can't remember the definition that we came up with like off the top of my head because it's long, it's a little technical. But the main spirit of it is if it works with your eyes closed, it's a podcast. Now let me read you the actual definition. A podcast is an on-demand show rooted in the spoken word and fully intelligible as audio. It is typically episodic and conversational. It is accessed as audio or video via open RSS and other distribution methods. So kind of three really important things that I just want to say about this. One, it's a definition, okay, which we don't have right now. And I would say we need one. So that was the first part of what we resolved. Two is the RSS versus closed systems, open and closed. We as a group took a both and position. It's not a podcast because it's in a closed ecosystem, even if it's not on RSS. But RSS is very much a part of what I think that is like behind the ethos of what we traditionally understand podcasts to be. So we want to honor that. The other thing is audio, video. Is it one? Is it the other? It's both. It is rooted in the spoken word, but it can have a video or it cannot. The way I see it is like the future of the medium. I think that there's like a carpool lane, like there's one lane on the highway of podcasting that's for audio only. Everybody else offers both, and the consumption is going to lean more toward audio. That's where the deepest engagement is going to happen. So that's the definitional piece. We can unpack more as the day goes on, but let's move to the exposure metrics, and I'm going to let Giles unpack this.
Yeah, this relates to us talking about the download, which we have talked about as an industry and used as the primary currency for the industry since its inception, really. And I think a lot of advertisers, look at media plans, they look at, 100,000 downloads for a certain show. And historically, a lot of us have equated that means 100,000 impressions, and it doesn't. And some groups in the industry, our friends at Bumper here, for example, have been more and more vocal about trying to make people clear that a download does not mean a piece of content, a show, or an ad has actually ever been consumed by anyone. So that's why we've used this word exposure to try and move the industry away from the fact that, a download just represents a file moving from one device to another to actual exposure to the content. And so instead of using a download as a standard, which doesn't work in the video era anyway, we have proposed a play metric of 30 seconds of consecutive consumption for a podcast to qualify as, an impression or a play, whether it's on video or on audio. And similarly with an ad impression, that doesn't require a 30-second standard. That's just, once any part of the ad starts playing, but actually is played by a user, that will count as an ad impression. So that's our proposal. I won't go into the audience metrics, but it's a big evolution from where we are today with a download that isn't really very representative and doesn't cover anything on video.
You want to mention anything about the phasing?
We don't expect the industry to just switch over to these new play metrics or impression metrics. Many of you may remember when Apple changed the measurement for how they count downloads in podcasts in iOS 17. A lot of publishers and creators' numbers changed overnight, very suddenly, and it caused a lot of disruption in the industry, and it caused a lot of financial harm for some people. So we've been very mindful, and this is part of the beauty of having a group that's really truly representing the whole industry. We're very mindful of avoiding that type of shock in the future, and so we've sort of proposed that this can be rolled out gently and with careful and clear communication across the industry. People can be well prepped for it. As Dan said, you can still be reporting and transacting on your existing metrics for now, but there's kind of a smooth path to transition forward. So we end up with better quality data to make better decisions, but without, causing the disruption.
And the only other thing I would add is when you see the document, you got 48 pages, a lot of it's very technical, and it's for reasons like that. we have not just like a definition of how to do a play in a standard way. That doesn't take that long. But then there's a lot of work on the technical implementation. And we also have market guidance, so we don't unnecessarily shock the system. We don't want anybody to get hurt. We just want to move to a better standard, and that needs to be done in a managed way. Okay, let's talk about attribution. Giles, I think people want to know if their ads worked. What have we done? Show them what they won.
Well, again, historically, attribution has worked off a download. So we're doing attribution, but we actually don't know if anyone ever truly saw or heard your ad. So the first part of our attribution proposal is that it should be based off these exposure metrics, which we have also recommended. So someone will actually have been exposed to an ad, and then we will do the attribution calculations. But the most important piece of it, which has a sort of standalone section in the document with the technical guidelines, is making randomized user-level holdout groups a standard thing that's available in the industry that can be implemented on the ad server side. A lot of us are using, different ways of creating control groups, whether it's geographic testing or synthetic controls, or the industry is now starting to move towards more user-level holdout groups. But that's really, I think, considered by most advertisers as gold standard in incrementality. And what we're proposing is a portion of all of the ads that are due to be delivered by the ad server will just be held to the side, and say a certain percentage of people will just not receive an ad, or they'll receive a PSA ad. So making that a standardized thing in the industry will bring the quality of attribution available in podcasting up to a level that's much more comparable with what you expect to see in other channels. And so we're really optimistic this make a big difference for you and a big difference for the future of the industry.
Okay, moving along. So kind of here are the benefits to the different stakeholder groups, all represented in this room. We're doing this on behalf of brands. That's what motivates us. This conference is about, benefiting brands, but we're doing a little family business here as an industry as well. We kind of have everybody here. This is not a zero-sum proposal. What we didn't want is something where we're just moving food off of one person's plate onto another. We want something where everybody kind of goes together, and that's why nobody's like, it's not perfect for anybody, but it's acceptable for everybody is, really what we've been after. And so, for brands, you get a cleaner comparison and a number that is defensible. You want to talk about what's in it for creators?
Yeah, I think creators, it's more and more important that they have clarity about the true size of their audiences, and if you're a show with, again, 100,000 downloads, you don't really know if 80,000 people are listening or 50,000 people are listening. And increasingly, as we've talked about, as podcast and creator just moves, across all surfaces, perhaps you're doing a partnership with another creator or planning an event. Like, there's an enormous amount of value to know actually how big really is my audience so that I can make good decisions and good deals moving forward. So there's a lot of value there, I think.
Okay, what about the platforms? What's in it for them?
I mean, I think this is just more of the long-term, pitch for the industry. We've seen it's in the document. It shows what's happened in, radio and TV, and even in the internet age when standards have been introduced to those categories. And perhaps there's some, as we talked about, perhaps some anxiety on the sell side about sort of the numbers changing. But actually, there's a long history of these types of standards changing and growth just continuing to be really, really well supported. So, it should lead to a healthier and bigger category overall.
Yeah, and I think that's the main point here is that, with all of the fragmentation that's going on in media, the benefit is that every distribution platform and a lot of different constituencies get to kind of set their own rules and be an island unto themselves. But I think that while there's an ask in here to say, well, let's also create a shared standard that can be used, the bigger thing is that if you give up a little bit of that independence and have a shared standard, all boats will rise. The interdependence, because we're already kind of yoked together anyway. The question is, are we actually going to start cooperating and moving everybody in the same direction to move it forward? And that's really what this is about. So the accords are public now. They are your accords, if you will have them. At the end of the day, I don't think most of us really care that much about the nuance of what standards we land on. Like, I don't really, for me personally, I'm not, like, it's not a hill to die on if a play is 30 seconds or 60 seconds, right? Like, yeah, longer is better for our interests and what side of the table we're on. But the reality is, like, a standard that everybody agrees on is so much better than no standard, even if it's not our preferred standard. And so what I would invite everybody to consider is that, like, the hard part is getting the alignment, getting the agreement, and trying to move towards something versus trying to wait for what's perfect for you or your stakeholders at your company. Because that's what's going to keep us circling for another 5 years without any progress on this thing. So if you have a better idea, bring it, please. I don't care. We don't care if you can improve upon what we're putting into the market. We just need to have some alignment on something, and we've already done the work to kind of get stakeholders to align on what that could be.
And I think the really important thing to make clear here is, this is a set of proposals that a group of sort of individuals in the market have agreed really could make sense for the market and really could benefit everybody in the market. But they're just proposals right now. And you, particularly the brands in the market, Dan said, you are the most influential people in the market. You are bringing the money to the table. So talk to your buyers, talk to your agencies, talk to your media partners, and ask them about this. Ask them if they're planning to adopt this. Ask them if they're able to make these types of exposure metrics available. Ask if they're working with their hosting partners to get the randomized user level holdout groups in place. Because it's only when brands start to advocate, the market starts to advocate, that this really starts to change and the conversations start to really move the market.
The other thing, just to disclaim, is that, like, the representation we had on this task force was wonderful because we had every kind of part of the ecosystem represented, and some of the larger entities that are truly going to be necessary if there's going to be any type of shared standards were present. That being said, nobody was there acting with full authority on behalf of their company. So let's not, misrepresent what happened here. We got the right people talking, but it's not like they got all their, C-suite to align and sign off. And that's why it's really important that this group understands and advocates, because I think what's important, and the people that really need to make the decisions, I think most of the people in this room are like, great, yes, let's do standards. But if you don't advocate for that publicly, then what happens is we get stuck. And what I think is really motivating to the people that need to be persuaded to move toward a shared standard is they need to understand that it's better for brands and it's better for creators. And that's where you guys really come in to make this real. What else?
I think I already said this, actually. I mean, read and support the records. It is 45 pages or something. You don't need to read all of them, but you could read the parts you are most interested in. Again, it's what I just said. It's advocate for this. Talk to people in the market about it, get the conversation going, talk to your networks, talk to your creator partners, and start agitating for this change. Because if we come together, if we put our voices towards this as a community, this could really bring change to the industry.
You've heard the saying, he who has the gold makes the rules. I think you need to use your voice if you're an advertiser, truly. If you don't do that, if you don't leverage the position that you have, we get stuck, and we can yell into a well and beg and try to, be very charming about it. Doesn't matter. The money needs to talk. So please let your voice be heard on this. Today, read the accords. If you're like behind part of it, say what you're behind, say what you're not, propose things. It's fine. We want this to be an open discussion for the industry, but we need to move it along.
Yeah, and there is, if you do go to that page, there will be, or there should be, or even just email us. Like, you can send your feedback to us at Oxford Road. Tell us that you support it. Tell us that you endorse it. If you're willing, tell us that you're willing to, put your name on the record that you're behind this. That will help us, build a list, a coalition of parties that are really, building the momentum here.
So there you have it, the state of podcasting. And I hope that this was not only informative for you, I hope it is a call to arms. I hope that you're ready to not only engage with the AMP Accords, But we hope that you're ready to make some noise about it. And we want to hear what you have to say. You can learn more at ampaccords.com. That is AMPACCORDS.com. And let's start getting out of our own way. This podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road, where we want you to succeed in podcasting, if that hasn't already been made clear. We also believe in audio and creator medium, and that these can be platforms to do good. If you're a marketer and you're looking to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, please check us out, oxfordroad.com. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter. It's called The Influencer. Give us feedback at info@mediaroundtable.com. Special thank you to Haley, Bianca, Brian, Rocio, Kyle, Ezra, Paulina, Everett, Neil, the people that I'm forgetting, and the team at Podcast One. As always, influence responsibly.